"You don't belong here." That's what she said, right there on the land where I once planted every single flower. In front of strangers, in front of the police. She waved her hand, signaling for them to remove me like I was some trespasser. She thought she'd won, thought I had no rights left. But there was one thing she didn't know. My name had been on the land title since 2015, and that day, I didn't leave. I simply pulled out the notarized copy and said, "Call the sheriff back. I think you'll want to stay for this. My name is Amelia Torres. I live in San Marcos, Texas, right at the edge of town where the grass grows high and the nights stay quiet. The kind of place where you hear crickets instead of cars. And for a long time, I thought this land would be my forever home." Rick and I bought the property back in 2012. 2 acres, big oak trees, a broken down fence we promised to fix but never did. We weren't rich. We weren't perfect. But we had something that felt solid. We built a small dog shelter together. I'd always wanted to rescue animals, and he, surprisingly, supported that dream. We named it Second Chances, because deep down, we both needed one. The land was in both our names, joint ownership, filed and signed, but things started to shift after the 5th year. The way Rick looked at me changed, the way he stopped showing up at the shelter. And one day, he just said it. "I think we've grown apart, Mel." He didn't yell, didn't throw things, just slid a divorce paper across the table, like it was a bill. I stared at it, not angry, not surprised, just tired. I told him he could keep the house, the furniture, the truck, but the land. The land was mine too. I needed it, not for money, not even for pride, but because it had pieces of me buried in it. Every flower bed, every dog's grave, every broken shovel in the shed. He didn't argue. He said, "Okay." The lawyers filed the deed properly. My name remained on the title. Confirmed, recorded, legal. So I left, packed a single suitcase, moved into a small rental on the other side of town, and told myself I'd visit every so often to see Max, the old mutt who still waited by the gate. For a while, it worked. I came by twice a week, fed the dogs, pulled weeds, sat under the oak tree where Rick and I used to drink sweet tea. It wasn't home anymore, but it was still mine, and I held on to that, quietly, until the day I pulled up and saw her, blonde, young, red dress like she was going to a party. She leaned on the fence, tossing grapes into her mouth, laughing like she'd been here forever. And when I stepped out of the car, she squinted at me like I was the help. "Can I help you?" she asked. Not rude, just possessive. I blinked. "I'm here to see Max." I said, "This is my land. I'm Amelia." She tilted her head, then she laughed. "Oh, you're the ex." I didn't respond, just walked past her, heading toward the kennel. But she didn't move, just whispered behind me, "Not your land anymore, sweetie." I paused, turned back, and for a moment, I saw it in her eyes, the assumption that because I'd been quiet, I'd also been weak. But she didn't know me, and she definitely didn't know the land she was standing on. Not yet. The next time I came back, she was already there again. This time, barefoot, toes painted coral pink, sipping something from a mason jar with lemon slices floating at the top. She looked like a magazine ad for someone else's life. I stepped out of my car slowly. My boots hit the gravel with a crunch. Max barked from behind the fence. His bark was hoarse now, age creeping in. He remembered me, but she didn't even turn. "Did you not get the message last time?" she asked, still staring straight ahead. I didn't answer. I walked toward the gate. The gate I helped hang, the same hinges I once greased when they creaked in the winter. She moved, finally, stood between me and the latch, and smiled like a hostess politely rejecting a party crasher. "Rick's not here," she said, "and you don't have permission to be on the property." I looked her dead in the eye. "My name's still on the land title." I said, calm, measured, "I don't need permission." Her expression didn't change, but her hand twitched slightly. She wasn't expecting me to know that. Wasn't expecting a woman who kept quiet to remember legal terms. "You're not married anymore," she said. "You have no rights." He told me everything's his now. I raised an eyebrow. "Did he also tell you I signed nothing over? That the court recognized my legal interest in this land?" She faltered, just for a second. Then she laughed. A slow, theatrical laugh like she was trying to win some invisible audience. "You can talk to Rick if you've got questions," she said, already walking back to the porch. "But if you step onto that soil, I will call the police." I stood still. Watched her walk away. Watched her pick up her phone and type something with those glossy red nails. Max whimpered softly. I turned around and left. Not because I was scared, but because I knew what came next. Needed preparation. I didn't go home. I went straight to my attorney's office. Gerald Franklin, 58, wears bow ties like it's still 1979. He looked up when I walked in, eyes sharp behind his wire frames. "Something tells me this ain't a friendly visit," he said. I slid into the seat across from him. "She's trying to push me out. Gerald." He nodded once. "You bring the documents." I pulled out the folder. Deed, court order, copies of the divorce agreement, all neatly tabbed. He reviewed them in silence, lips pressed together. After 10 minutes, he spoke. "You're on the title. That's ironclad. Unless you sold your share or relinquished interest, which you didn't, no one can remove you." I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. "She called me a trespasser." Gerald snorted. "Let her. All it takes is one visit from law enforcement to wake her up. But let's make it clean. Let's do it right." We filed a notice of interest the next day, stamped, recorded, made public. That meant any future buyer, lender, or nosy neighbor would know. Amelia Torres legally owns this land. But I didn't stop there. I printed 3 copies of the title, one for my records, one for the sheriff's office, and one laminated in plastic, tucked neatly in my glove box. I went back the following week. This time, I brought Max a new chew toy and wore my steel-toed boots. She saw me pull up, storm down the steps, lips already curled. "You have some nerve," she said, "coming back here after I told you." I didn't let her finish. I reached into the glove box, pulled out the laminated deed, and held it up. She blinked, stepped closer, read the name. Her face dropped. Then she laughed again. "Okay, fine," she snapped. "You want to play legal games? Bring your lawyer and let's see what Rick has to say." I smiled, because she didn't know. Rick already had said it. On paper, in court, under oath. She just wasn't part of the story yet. She spun on her heel and walked away. Max ran up to the fence, tail wagging, tongue out. I crouched and whispered, "Hang tight. Buddy, this is still home." And in that moment, I wasn't just reclaiming dirt and trees. I was reclaiming my place, my history, and slowly, my voice. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay on my couch, the TV flickering in silence. Every corner of that property flashed through my mind. The bent garden gate, the cedar tree Rick and I planted on our 2nd anniversary, the storm cellar I painted yellow so I wouldn't be afraid of it. None of those things were hers. But she walked around like she owned air, sky, and soil. I opened the drawer beside me and took out the old notebook, the one where I kept every repair log, every planting plan, every name of every dog we ever saved, proof, in ink and dirt, that this wasn't just land, it was a life. The next day, I did something small, but it felt huge. I walked into the San Marcos County Recorder's office and filed a request to segment the property. My lawyer said it was symbolic, but legal. It would make it even harder for anyone to pretend I didn't exist. I also requested visitation rights for the animal shelter. It sounded strange, but it worked. Because the shelter was a joint project, and I'd donated the original fencing and foundation. The court allowed me supervised access twice a week. When Brittany got that notice, she must have exploded, because the very next morning, Rick called me, First time in months. Mel, what are you doing? His voice was tired, like he hadn't slept either. I'm not doing anything. Rick, I said, just making sure no one erases me. There was silence. Then she's scared you'll try to take the house. I didn't laugh. I wanted to. Tell her I don't want her house. I want my soil, my fence line, my dogs. Another pause. You always did care more about the dogs than the drama. Still do. He sighed. I'll talk to her. But it was too late for talk. I wasn't backing down. She could laugh, scream, call the cops. But now the state of Texas was backing me. I started showing up again, not every day, but enough to be seen, enough to remind her. I wasn't gone. And every time I stepped onto that red dirt road, holding my laminated deed and my dignity, I saw her eyes narrow. Not because she was afraid of me, but because she finally realized I wasn't just Rick's ex-wife. I was the woman she couldn't erase. The air was thick that morning, heavy with humidity and the tension of something inevitable. I knew when I pulled into that long gravel driveway, something was going to break. The air didn't lie. Brittany was already outside. She had a phone in one hand and a gardening glove on the other, as if pretending she ever worked that land. She saw my car and didn't flinch, just straightened up and smiled like she was posing for a neighborhood watch brochure. You again? She said. Not surprised, not angry, just amused. Like I was some form of entertainment she hadn't quite figured out yet. I walked to the fence. Max barked once low, old, but he still knew me. The laminated deed was already in my hand. I didn't wave it. I didn't need to. By now, it was my shield, my sword, my proof of existence. I told you last time, Brittany said, stepping closer. This is private property. You can't just keep showing up. I met her eyes. Actually, I held up the document. My name's right here. Still on the title. Still on record. Still legal. She laughed again. That same hollow, sarcastic laugh she always used when her power felt threatened. You think a piece of paper scares me? Go ahead. Call the cops. Let them sort it out. And then she actually did, right there, in front of me. Dialed 911 like she was reporting a wild bear on the lawn. Yes, hi, she said sweetly. There's a woman trespassing on my property. She's refusing to leave. I didn't interrupt, didn't argue, just stepped back, crossed my arms, and waited, because I knew what was coming. 20 minutes later, the sheriff's car pulled up. Deputy Ramirez, tall, mid-40s, firm, but fair. I'd met him once before during an animal cruelty case I'd helped report. He stepped out slowly, one hand resting lightly near his belt. Ma'am, he said, approaching me, we got a call about a trespasser. Can I ask your name? Amelia Torres, I said calmly. I handed him the plastic folder with the deed. Brittany interrupted. She's Rick's ex-wife. She snapped, she's been harassing me. This isn't her land anymore. Ramirez didn't even look at her. He read the document, line by line, silent. His eyes paused on the notary stamp, on the court filing, on the date. Then he turned to me. This is a legal title, he said. You're on it. Still active. Still binding. Brittany's face twisted. That can't be right, Rick said. He cut her off. Doesn't matter what Rick said. If Ms. Torres is on the title, she's not trespassing. I didn't smirk. I didn't gloat, but inside my spine straightened by an inch. So she can just come here, Brittany shouted, whenever she wants? If the title allows her legal co-ownership, then yes, Ramirez said plainly. You'll need to work this out civilly, not through emergency services. She was fuming, absolutely red. I could see it, her whole fantasy collapsing, the version of reality where she was queen of the castle, and I was the ghost of a failed marriage, finally exorcised. Ramirez handed me the folder back, nodded once, then walked to his car without another word. I turned to leave, but paused. I looked at her. Still standing there, still breathing like a dragon holding in fire. You can try to ignore paperwork, I said quietly, But the law doesn't care what you believe. It only cares what's filed. And then I walked away, step by step, gravel crunching beneath me. That day, I didn't just win an argument. I reclaimed my presence. I reminded her I was real, permanent, not going anywhere. But I knew Brittany. This wouldn't be the end. It was just the beginning of her unraveling, and I was ready for it. Later that week, I got an envelope, certified mail, no return address. Inside, a letter from a lawyer, her lawyer, accusing me of harassment, threatening a restraining order, claiming I was showing up unannounced and causing emotional distress. I took it straight to Gerald. He read it, then leaned back and shook his head. She's trying to flip the story. He said, classic scare tactic. What do we do? I asked. We answer legally, and then we counterfile. And that's exactly what we did. A formal response, attached with proof, court-validated documents, photographs, a copy of the sheriff's incident report from that day. I added one more thing to the packet, a written request for mutual land use boundaries, meaning if she wanted to control her half, she better learn exactly where mine began. Weeks passed. I kept my distance, not out of fear, but because I didn't need to keep showing up. The law was now walking beside me. She was cornered by her own arrogance. And then Rick reached out again. But this time, not to scold. He wanted to meet in person. She's making things worse, he said, eyes tired. I didn't sign up for war. I sipped my coffee, waited. What are you asking for? I said. He slid a folder across the diner table. Transfer of title. His half. To me. Voluntary. Signed and notarized. I'm done, he said. She wants to fight, she can do it without me. For a moment, I couldn't speak. Then I nodded. I'll take care of the land, I said, like I always have. I walked out of that diner with the papers held to my chest, not out of joy, but out of relief, because now I wasn't just on the title. I was the sole owner. And Brittany, she had no idea what was coming next. Owning the land outright felt strange. Not like a victory lap, not even like peace. It felt like breathing after being underwater too long. Every breath felt new, sharp, real. Rick's signature was inked in black across the transfer papers, filed, stamped, processed. Just like that, I was no longer a co-owner. I was the owner of the land, of the fence line, of the past they tried to erase. Gerald, my lawyer, called me the moment it cleared. Congratulations. He said, you now legally own all 2 acres, lock, soil, and shed. I sat on my porch, phone in hand, heart slow. I wasn't smiling. I was remembering every time Brittany told me I had no rights. Every time she waved me off like I was invisible. Every time she dismissed my silence as weakness. They thought I had left everything behind. But I left nothing. I was always watching, always recording, always planning. I showed up to the land 3 days later, this time not with laminated deeds, but with a locksmith and a sheriff's escort. The notice had already been posted, 30 days warning to vacate all unauthorized occupants, signed by me, backed by the deed, stamped by the county. When we arrived, Brittany was on the porch in a silk robe, holding a smoothie. She didn't recognize the locksmith at first, didn't notice the sheriff in uniform behind me, until she did. What the hell is this? She barked, stepping down. Why is there a cop here? I looked her square in the eye. You're trespassing. This land now legally belongs to me. Fully, undisputed. She scoffed. Rick would never. I held up the transfer. Signed, dated, recorded. The sheriff cleared his throat. Ma'am, you've received notice. You're required to leave the premises within 72 hours. Refusal will result in court action. She froze. For the first time, genuinely speechless. That silence was louder than all her laughter. She didn't scream, she didn't beg, she just turned, slammed the door, and disappeared inside. The sheriff turned to me. You sure you want to enforce this now? I nodded. I gave her time. More than she ever gave me. The locks were changed within 45 minutes. The porch lights flickered off. By dusk, the property was silent again. But this time, it was mine. Every inch. I walked around the back, past the kennels, past the overgrown flower beds, and sat under the old oak tree. It had aged, like me, but it was still standing, like me. I closed my eyes and remembered the first shovel I pushed into this dirt, the first dog we saved, the first argument I had with Rick about putting gravel or mulch around the back entrance. I had lived here in silence. I had left in silence. And now, I returned with a voice, an authority. The next morning, I filed for full re-registration of the shelter, under one name, Amelia Torres. I contacted every vet, every volunteer, every past adopter, told them we were back, stronger, legitimately ours. The community responded. Donations flowed in. Volunteers returned. People I hadn't spoken to in years showed up with leashes and lawnmowers. Because it wasn't just about a plot of land. It was about what that land represented. A woman who refused to be erased. A mission that refused to die. A voice that may have been quiet, but never silent. 3 days after the eviction, I got a letter, handwritten, no envelope, slid under the gate. It read, "You'll regret this. You think you won, but karma's a real thing." No signature, but the perfume on the paper told me exactly who sent it. I folded it, dropped it in the fire pit, and lit a match. Because I didn't need revenge. I didn't need her apology. I had something better. I had my name back. My roots. My land. And there's no paper in the world that can take that away again. It's strange how quiet the land feels now. No more shouting, no more pretending, no more strangers pacing the porch like they owned a legacy they never helped build. The wind sounds different when it moves through trees planted with love, not entitlement. I walk the perimeter each morning, boots kicking gravel, heart steady. Max walks with me when he's able. He's slower now, arthritis creeping in, but we're still here, two old souls holding ground. I spent the weeks after the eviction restoring what mattered, repainting the shelter sign, scrubbing mildew from the barn walls, clearing out the junk Brittany left behind, flimsy yoga mats, crushed cartons of overpriced juices, a shattered vanity mirror in the guest room she once declared her meditation sanctuary. It was like sweeping out a storm that thought it could stay. But the ground still remembered me. The foundation never shifted. The town started talking, of course. Some quietly applauded. Some stayed suspicious. And some, like always, just wanted to be near the heat of a good story. But I didn't correct anyone. I didn't explain. Because the only truth that mattered was in the deed, and the dirt beneath my feet. You don't owe an explanation when you've already won legally, silently, and fully. One morning, I received a call from Rick. His voice was different, softer, maybe tired. She left, he said, took her stuff, filed for a separation. I waited. She said you humiliated her, he continued, that you destroyed her life. I held the phone in silence. Let the words sit there. Mel, I didn't destroy anything, I said quietly. I reclaimed what was already mine. He sighed. I could almost hear the regret bubbling under his breath. She never really wanted the land, he admitted. She just didn't want you to have it. And there it was, the root of so many wars. Not desire, but denial. She didn't want the soil. She wanted my erasure. And when that failed, she collapsed into dust. I didn't say goodbye, I just hung up. Some closures don't require a bow, just a boundary. Weeks turned into months. The shelter blossomed. New kennels were installed. A high school student built agility ramps for a senior project. A local vet offered discounted vaccines every second Saturday. And for the first time in years, I saw children laughing on the same grass where I once stood crying. One afternoon, I received an invitation to speak at a women's leadership circle in Austin. Topic: property, persistence, and personal power. I almost said no. But then I thought of all the women who stayed silent, who left quietly, who were erased. Not because they were wrong, but because they didn't have a laminated deed in their glove box and a spine made of Texas limestone. So I said yes. That night, standing in front of a room full of strangers, I told my story, From the day Rick handed me the divorce papers, to the moment the sheriff said, "She's not trespassing," to the fire pit where I burned the last threat she ever tried to send me. I didn't speak loudly, but I spoke clearly. And when I finished, the room was silent in a way that felt like thunder held its breath. A woman approached me after. Her voice trembled. "I left my land to my ex-husband because I didn't think I could fight him," she said. "But now, I think I'm going to look into it again." I smiled, not because I wanted war, but because I knew what it meant to light a match in someone else's dark. By fall, the shelter was running like a machine. I started taking Sundays off again. I planted new rose bushes. I even painted the front door teal the same color it was when we first bought the land. People came and went. Dogs got adopted, new puppies arrived, and the land, once again, felt like what it was always meant to be, a place for healing, for quiet power, for women who refused to vanish. I kept the original deed in a shadow box above my desk, not as a trophy, but as a reminder that even when they laugh at you, even when they erase your name from the mailbox, even when they call the cops and say you don't belong, truth doesn't need permission, and power doesn't always shout. Sometimes it just signs in ink and waits.